if I told you that we don't live in the world we think we live in? You've probably seen the movie The Matrix, right? The hero, Neo, has this nagging sense that there's something off in his world. Then he makes this unbelievable discovery. As real as everything looks and feels all around him, it's all an illusion. Sophisticated supercomputers have manufactured a reality that's completely different from the one he actually lives in. I think something like that's happening to all of us right now. Now, hold on. Before you reach behind your heads, yank out your cords, and climb out of your pods, let me explain. If you've turned on the news or scrolled through your social media feed, you probably have the sense that America is more polarized and divided than it's ever been before, right? We're a hopelessly broken and divided nation that's brimming with white supremacists, Antifa supporters, anti-vaxxers, domestic terrorists, conspiracy theorists, communist socialists. It's crazy, right? Half of the country literally hates the other half. That's the reality we see every day. But I've stood on both sides of this divide, and it's allowed me to see a different reality. 11 years ago, I quit my job as an executive at a large media company in Los Angeles, and I moved with my family to a small town in Montana, a state that's conservative, 90% white, and overwhelmingly Christian. Now, since I'm gay, and also black, by the way, I am the definition of a statistical outlier. And I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure that many of my friends were taking bets on just how long a gay black woman would survive in big sky country. And I'm thinking the smart money was on 6 months or less. In fact, shortly before we left, a very thoughtful and concerned colleague emailed me an article about a Baptist pastor who'd relocated from Florida to set up a church near our new home. Now, why was my colleague concerned? Because this pastor, according to the article, was a white supremacist. Apparently, he thought people of color were subhuman. He wasn't wild about gay people either. Denying us rights wasn't enough. He wanted us dead. Understandably, my colleague was fearful for our safety. I mean, who wouldn't be terrified after reading something like that? Well, needless to say, we ended up moving to Montana anyway, because I'm the kind of person who would have jumped in a covered wagon and headed west, even if everyone was warning me about Indians and bandits. That's just how I roll. But here's where the story gets good. A few years ago, I'm going into the Verizon store, pick up the phone, and I happen to start chatting with this young guy. He'd really recently relocated to Montana. We realize we have a lot in common. Bada bing, bada boom, we become friends. Fast forward to last fall. He's reading my blog, and he gives me a call. Hey, who's that white supremacist pastor you wrote about in your post? You know, the one your colleague warned you about? I give him the pastor's name. And then my friend does the last thing I would expect. He starts laughing. He says, I know this guy. And I'm thinking, you're kidding. I'm waiting for him to give me all the juicy, horrible details about this man. And then he tells me, he's my pastor. And I'm like, what? And he says, yeah, I've known this guy for years. He's actually my mentor and my confidant. In fact, everyone in my family loves him. Mind blown, right? But that's not the end of the story, because there's a twist. You see, my friend isn't white. My friend is black. If you're wondering how in the world a black man and his family can forge a deeply personal relationship with a supposed white supremacist, I think I have the answer. I think it's because we don't live in the world that we think and we're told that we live in. I remember that conversation with my friend so vividly because it was my aha moment. It helped me make sense of something that had puzzled me for so long. I mean, here we are in this incredibly polarized and divided country, yet I spent the last 11 years of my life in a place that's 90% white, Christian, very conservative, yet everyone I meet treats me with kindness and respect. I mean, I'm thinking, if I'm going to run into extremists anywhere, it's going to be there, right? So where are all of these people? And that's when I began to appreciate the power of the labels we use to define each other. See, if we use these inflammatory labels recklessly or carelessly, they can actually distort our collective reality and our understanding of the other side. They can make us believe that we live in a world we don't really live in. And I think that's why this country seems so divided now. We're making assumptions about people we've never met based on labels other people have given them. And we're using these labels in the broadest possible way. If we're on the left and we believe in free market capitalism, but we've got a problem with the gaping wealth divide in America, we're a socialist or a communist. If we're on the right and we believe people of all races should be treated equally, but we have some problems with anti-racist ideology, we're a white supremacist. And if we simply question a popular narrative or float an unusual theory or idea, we're a conspiracy theorist. The problem with using these inflammatory labels so recklessly and so carelessly is that it makes it easier for us to demonize and dehumanize the other side. A wall goes up and we put other people on the other side of that wall. We don't want to connect with them. We don't want to hear anything they have to say. And that's what I think is the greatest danger now. We are defining people with labels without really thinking about who they are. The problem with using these labels without asking questions is that it keeps us from humanizing the other side. It keeps us from relating to them. We don't stop to ask, is this person really a racist? Are they really a white supremacist? Are they really a conspiracy theorist? We don't take the time to find out if the people we fear are really as scary as we've been told. Now, it's tempting to think that my personal experience is just an outlier, but there's actually data that supports it. According to the nonpartisan research group More in Common, Americans have deeply distorted perceptions of people who are different from us. In 2019, More in Common conducted a study of Republicans, Democrats, and independents called How False Perceptions Are Pulling Americans Apart. Their research compared the extent to which these groups think they disagree on issues to the extent to which they actually disagree. It's something they call the perception gap, and the findings were mind-blowing. Both Republicans and Democrats think twice as many people on the other side have extreme views than actually do. 2, the deeper and stronger our party allegiance and affiliation, the more likely we are to have a distorted view of the other side. And 3, this is the most shocking, education does nothing to reduce the perception gap. In fact, in some cases, our education even widens our misperception of the other side. So, what's causing these deep distortions in our reality? According to More in Common's research, it's our media. More in Common found that the more news a person consumes, the wider their perception gap. In fact, people who consume news most of the time are 3 times as inaccurate in their perception of the other side than people who only watch or read the news occasionally. But this isn't the only data pointing to the media's role in fueling this illusion of division. Between 2016 and 2020, Boston Globe editor Diane Hesson conducted thousands of interviews with American voters, and she found that cable news actually distorts our perception of the other side by focusing on people on the fringe. Why do they do this? Because they get more eyeballs and higher ratings when they fixate on people with the loudest, most extreme views. And it's not just legacy media, by the way. If you've seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, you know that social media platforms are using algorithms to funnel users into these echo chambers that amplify and enhance extreme views and behavior and thoughts. In other words, the media that we're trusting to inform us and that we're relying on to connect us are actually pulling us apart. But here's the good news. What's been pulled apart can be made whole again. We can come together. We can overcome this perception gap. So how do we do it? According to Dr. Tanya Israel, author of the book Beyond Your Bubble, the first thing we can do is adjust the lens we use to see people who are different from us. We need to understand that most Americans aren't white supremacists or Antifa sympathizers or any other sort of extremists. The vast majority of people are balanced and sensible and don't have any sort of extreme views whatsoever. In fact, if you think of most people in your life, you'll probably realize, even if you disagree with some of them on a few issues, very, very few are radicalized. Now, why is that important? Because we can't meaningfully connect with people with opposing beliefs or value systems until we humanize them. Once we realize that people aren't walking, talking ideologies or sound bites, but complex, textured, nuanced human beings, that makes it so much easier for us to dialogue with them. The next thing we can do is approach people who disagree with us from a place of curiosity. We can ask questions to get a better sense of why they believe what they believe and what they base their opinions on. Lastly, my personal journey has taught me the importance of not making assumptions of people we don't know. Opening ourselves to the possibility that what we may have heard or read about them might have been taken out of context and might not represent who they really are. Now, changing the way we're used to seeing and dealing with people who are different from us, it's not going to be easy. I'll admit that. But consider this. In the past 50 years, we've opened our minds and completely changed the way we see people of color, women, gay and lesbian Americans. If we have the power to do that, surely we have the power to change the way we see anyone who's different from us. I'm reminded of something Martin Luther King Jr. told us decades ago when we were trying to bridge a different kind of gap, the racial gap. And Martin Luther King told us, I am convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. And men fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they're separated from each other. America desperately needs to come together again. Our very survival could depend on it. I believe if we can unplug from that manufactured reality, climb out of our pods, and open our minds, we have the power to come together and move forward as one tribe and one people. Oh, and that Baptist pastor I was telling you about earlier? My friend ended up connecting us, and he actually reads my blog now. In fact, I decided to invite him to lunch a few weeks ago, and I kind of wanted to know why it is that my friend loved and respected a guy that other people think is a white supremacist. We set a date to meet next month, and who knows? If I'm around for another TED Talk, maybe I'll let you know how it goes.